All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's AMA session with the Lilypad Network. My name is Alex Moran, and I am the Chief of Staff here at Lilypad. I also help run the DevRel side of things. So please feel free to reach out to me on Discord, at Alex Moran. Also, feel free to reach out to me on X, Alex_Moran. Here to help. So, without further ado, I will first open up the floor to any questions. And if we don't have any questions, then we're going to jump right into the session. All right. Well, please feel free to add any questions into the chat, and let's get going. So I first thought I would start out the AMA by sort of going over what is Lilypad, why are we here, and what's kind of the current state of things. So a core component of the AI and ML infrastructure stack is compute. Of course, you have the networking, you have the storage. The compute is really essential for both training and running AI models. And as we've seen, GPU supply has sort of ebbed and flowed over time. Sometimes you can get tons of GPUs. Oftentimes, there's very little supply of GPUs available. And so developers and the community at large need access to compute in real time. In addition to that, we've seen really the compute for AI be dominated by a few large players. And so this is something that we believe very strongly in the Lilypad that should be more democratized and open so that not only developers can access compute without restrictions, but they can also provide or ensure reliable and redundant capacity no matter what the circumstances is. And it looks like we're joined here by Arsen. Arsen, I'm going to add you up to the stage. Would you be willing to just introduce yourself and just speak a little bit about what you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So some of the things that I'm involved in is focused on integrations, looking at how our potential partners can plug into the system and what kind of services could be built up around that.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. And we were all with the team in Brussels at ECC, had some incredible conversations, met some awesome partners. It definitely feels like we did quite a big step function in the right direction. Arsen, do you want to talk just for a second about your experience at IPFS Camp? I unfortunately wasn't able to make it, so it'd be great to sort of hear what you were seeing and where Lilypad sort of fits into that whole equation.
Yeah, IPFS is amazing technology as far as synchronization and across synchronizing a file system across multiple computers. I think kind of the workshop that I was part of focused on P2P lib and the infrastructure that goes along with that. That was interesting. It's technology has come a long way in terms of being able to make it accessible to a lot of developers, especially the armies of JavaScript developers that are out there. The team working, I think, Shipyard, right, is the organization that is maintaining Helio and the SDKs that they provide in various languages, C Sharp, Java, Python, but specifically JavaScript, I think, is what really opens this up to a lot of developers to be able to build tooling around P2P communication through direct channels.
Yeah, yeah, and it's amazing to see sort of this whole industry unfold. At the end of the day, we're looking at using modern technology to build safer, faster, cheaper mechanisms for running code, running AI models, creating redundancy, creating better security. And so it does feel like we're in the early days, but it's amazing to see, as you mentioned Helia, you mentioned some of these other innovations. Like it's amazing to see them sort of come out of the nascent stage into the actual mainstream and start to actually have enough scale and have enough power to really like do what we need it to do for modern web applications. So anyway, it's great to see. It's great to see that. Thanks for giving us a little bit of a rundown. And of course, Lilypad provides a huge piece of the puzzle here. Filecoin is a network that we work very closely with, and that's sort of the storage layer of this sort of equation. And then IPFS obviously provides the content addressing and the networking, and then Lilypad is focused on the compute. And so going back to sort of the slides here, what I was talking about, we feel like this is a really it's a full stack of solutions that end up creating this new sort of environment that we're proponents of, sort of this permissionless compute layer, and the ability to sort of verify what's going on, and specifically with when running AI models, with training AI models and fine tuning AI models, that kind of stuff. So just moving through, we would like to just quickly go over Lilypad and sort of what Lilypad looks like. What are we talking about here? So the general idea from a very high level is to allow the users in demand to find supply. And so Lilypad provides a marketplace of sorts that basically matches developers and end users with the compute they need to run, whether it's an AI model or some arbitrary code. Lilypad uses Docker. And so really a lot of different types of code can be run on the network. And so as you can see sort of here in the middle, we focus on very, very good developer experience. So, as I mentioned about ECC, Lilypad we're either partnering or in the process of partnering with quite a few companies that provide either decentralized storage, decentralized databases, lots of different types of verification methods to not only verify the data that is going into the compute is being checked and is what we want, but then also verifying the off-chain compute that actually happens on Lilypad. So the Lilypad network has been deployed to the Arbitrum Sepolia testnet. That is where we first deployed our network, and all of the off-chain compute that runs on the Lilypad network, then the sort of proof gets verified and saved on our blockchain on Arbitrum. And our intention is to, in the long run, have a multi-chain architecture where we're compatible with many different layer twos, mostly in the Ethereum world, but we'll see, how we end up sort of growing from there. The next part of this is sort of the value layers and the services. So a major priority for our team is to ensure very good developer experience. And so we have a web UI in the works. We have APIs you can use. We have an SDK also in the works. We have a very simple CLI, and we make it really easy for developers to just show up to our network and just quickly spin up and quickly be able to use either the existing models that we already have running on Lilypad. You can currently run, Stable Diffusion Video, Ollama, and many more. We also make it easy to add your own, code or your own model to run on Lilypad. And that's sort of the next point, which is the module marketplace. So currently, our team and some of the people from the community have built their own modules to run on Lilypad, which has been incredibly exciting to see. We love the creativity. We love, we're seeing models from the Rare Compute Project, which are focused on, rare disease research. We're seeing models from, image generation, text generation, video generation. And so the module marketplace is starting to come alive. It's definitely early days, and we are currently, pretty much focused on onboarding GPUs, onboarding supply. But in the meanwhile, this module marketplace continues to grow. And so it's been amazing to see, as I mentioned, all the creativity and really the different business use cases for running, basically outsourcing your backend infrastructure to Lilypad and making it really easy to either build a front end or to somehow communicate with our infrastructure to run your models. And the outputs are then saved in IPFS. We of course give you a local output. We give you a file, but we also the Lilypad network is using the Bacalhau generic decentralized compute architecture, and so this is awesome because not only are the servers orchestrated in a really efficient way, but the data that comes out of the model or comes out of the computation is then saved in IPFS. And so we now have verified content addressed outputs coming out of AI models, which, as we all know, and I think we can all agree that providing sort of a foundation of truth, or providing sort of a verification method of data coming out of AI models, is a very important thing, and is something that we've definitely prioritized and made sure is readily available. So, without further ado, we would like to invite all GPU providers, anyone with with a big enough GPU, to join our incentive net. The incentive net started back in June, and we basically have made it really easy to join the network and start earning reward points. So, the reward points that we're offering are called Lilybit credits, and these Lilybit credits are earned for uptime. So we are monitoring what GPUs are online on the network. We are having GPUs run a proof of work hash mechanism in order to verify not only uptime but also verify the capacity that your system has. So obviously, a 3080 graphics card will have a smaller hash rate than an A100 graphics card. And so we really appreciate everyone's patience from the community. This has been quite a task to implement. Huge props to Arson and the engineering team for really getting to the core of the problem and implementing a solution that not only gives us the information we need, but also prevents cheating, prevents Sybil attacks. We've learned a lot from other compute networks and some of the problems that they've faced with bot networks and Sybil attacks. And so we are very thankful to have an awesome team to implement some of these mechanisms, and we really appreciate the patience of the community as new releases come out, and we ask the community to update their nodes, and things are moving really well. But as always, there's complications that need to be addressed in real time, and so.
Just also want to add one more thing to this as well. There's plenty of room on the network for CPUs as well. There are many kinds of modules that can be implemented, and yes, GPUs are very valuable for performing a certain kind of calculation, but also the idea of there being thousands or even tens of thousands of CPU in the network is really valuable too. Specifically, I could think of a project that I was working on. It has a lot of different processing steps in the pipeline. And yes, GPU is used for certain types of processing, but also there are other steps that are not optimized for GPU. And the idea that I could submit a job and send that job across 10,000 computers that are CPU for a CPU based job, that is huge as well, because in general, I mean, there's a wide range of the number of cores that a computer would have, just a number of CPU cores, I mean. And that probably ranges somewhere between let's say 4 and 64, and it's up to the module to figure out how to split that job across those CPU cores. But the idea that you're not limited by the amount of cores on your computer for the type of a CPU job that needs to be performed is pretty amazing. So the basic idea would be you submit a job that can't be done on a GPU, and it would be very slow to do it on your own CPU, no matter how big your CPU is, i9 or an AMD CPU. So you submit the job, send it out, chop it up, send it out across 10,000 nodes, and instead of waiting for 2 days to have it complete, it could be performed across the network, brought back, synchronized, reassembled, and done in, let's say, 5 minutes. And that's what distributed computers are all about, in being able to carry out these kinds of calculations in parallel across the network. So I'm pretty excited about that as an offering as well, that Lilypad plays well with, in addition to the GPUs.
Yeah, no, thanks for contributing that. I mean, it's really exciting to provide, like you were saying, pulling together all of this compute into sort of just a place that you can go to just you get compute and just use it, but also like providing that redundancy, right, and that sort of robustness that traditional developers would just expect right out of the box, right? Like there's no and so anyway, yeah, that's really awesome. And so I'm actually curious, Arson, about if we've had some questions about sort of creating modules and stuff. Do you find that it's as easy or it's as straightforward to add a job that's running on a CPU versus a GPU. We've had some questions about, is there a difference there in terms of how you run it?
There isn't really a difference. I mean, it's a question of parameters that you specify in the configuration file, and we have some examples of that. So what you have is we have a template that we provide. It's in our GitHub, and you look at how, let's say, the image processing model is implemented, or how Olama is, or how the a large language model is implemented, or how just a basic hello world model is implemented, and you look at that as your kind of a starting point, and you modify that to reflect if you're building a custom module for yourself, if you're building a business and you have a certain process in mind that you want to be executed in a distributed way, you would take that as a starting point and kind of go from there. At the very base of it is you're building Docker containers, and what a platform offers is a way to call up those Docker containers across the network. And so whether you're doing it for a CPU based job or a GPU based job, it doesn't really make a difference.
Gotcha. Okay, awesome. Appreciate that. So, oops. All right. So we have a ton of resources for the community. This is only some of them. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight real quick. We've got a lot of questions about, hey, like, how do I check if my GPU is online? How do I disconnect a node? How do I check the status? There's a million questions, right? And so please jump in our Discord and feel free to ask any questions at all in general or in the I need help section. We also have these awesome resources. So, the first thing is our gpu.lilypad.tech website. This is where you can actually identify, is my GPU online? And am I, being noticed in terms of earning rewards? We currently are in the process of basically being able to report the rewards calculations to the community. We have not been able to provide that information yet in terms of how many points that everyone has been earning. That being said, as long as your GPU is on this list, do not worry. You are being kept. We are keeping track of that, the fact that you are on the network and that you are online, and we'll be releasing sort of the leaderboard, which you can actually see here in the bottom right. This metrics dashboard with the leaderboard in terms of how many points everybody has earned. We'll be releasing that as soon as possible, and so we're sort of just getting through some issues and making sure that the calculations are all being funneled in correctly. And then this metrics dashboard that you see here, info.lilypad.tech, will be sort of the one-stop shop for resource providers to understand, how many points they've earned. In the meanwhile, of course, you can use this gpu.lilypad.tech, status page. Of course, if you have any questions about how to run a node, docs.lilypad.tech provides, a very solid walkthrough of first setting up a MetaMask wallet and getting the tokens that you need, the Lilypad tokens that you need, getting the ETH, Sepolia or Arbitrum Sepolia ETH in order to actually run jobs, and then everything from installing Docker, installing NVIDIA drivers, to configuring your node and getting started. So again, feel free to reach out to us with any questions, but the documentation is pretty straightforward. And then please check out our blog. So blog.lilypadnetwork.org, where we have a lot of information about, the incentive net. So what does the program look like? And, how do the points calculations work? That second blog post you see in the bottom right, Lilybit rewards walks through how the actual calculations are made for each resource provider. So, we've gotten a lot of questions about sort of what are the requirements? What are you guys looking for? And how is all this calculated? So yeah, definitely check that out. And then, feel free to send us any questions that you do have. So I thought it would be, useful to walk through a little bit of what the Lilypad Incentive Net plan looks like. Obviously, there's a lot of pieces here, and we're taking it stage by stage in terms of what is being incentivized. We want to make sure that the mechanism we actually implement to incentivize behavior is solid and can't be gamed. And so we're taking this, slowly in stages, and making sure that everything is equitable and that it's, Sybil resistant. So where we currently are is GPU in the GPU onboarding stage. Again, as I mentioned, GPU resource providers who contribute a GPU to the network are given Lilybit rewards points. Again, that calculation is being worked on right now and will be made public as soon as possible. And it's a pretty straightforward thing, right? You contribute your idle computing resources, and it's a pretty easy setup to join this decentralized network. And as Arsen mentioned, once you're online, you become part of this big mesh of compute that then developers can tap into and leverage. And so obviously right now, GPU providers aren't paid for the work, but the points system that we have will be, upon mainnet launch. We're targeting, Q4 of this year for mainnet launch. The points that you earn will be redeemable for Lilypad tokens. And all of the details around that are still in the works. Our tokenomics is still being worked on to ensure it aligns with the vision and it's equitable to everybody. And so that we'll be releasing that as soon as possible as well. The next stage that we're incredibly excited about, and the tentative timeline for this is, it says September here. I would say maybe even starting, a little bit earlier, a little bit in August, is module onboarding. And actually, in addition to that, I think I had them flipped around, is plugins and integrations. And so, we're talking to a lot of partners right now about providing plugins and integrations for, everything under the sun. And so this is something that we will be incentivizing in the coming month or two. And we are still figuring out, the right way to quantify these contributions. Of course, if you contribute a module to the Lilypad network that can, a Docker image that anybody can then run, it's pretty easy to quantify that. And so, yeah, we'll be releasing a lot more information about sort of this next stage of, plugins, integrations, and module onboarding as soon as possible. Really, at the end of the day, we've got this incredible community. We're already seeing developers building, applications on top of Lilypad. We've seen a bunch of modules get added. And so, yeah, it's sort of like a learning process to understand, like, what is the community working on? What can we reward? And then, how does that look? And so, all of that is coming soon. And we're really excited to, build out an incredible developer experience. As we grow the supply of the network, then we want to match that supply with demand, right? And so, we were super excited to participate in the HackFS hackathon that happened recently. We also participated in the ECC hackathon in Sydney earlier this year. So we're already seeing like tremendous amounts of developer interest. And to Arsen's point earlier, there's sort of between GPU jobs and CPU jobs, there's sort of a almost infinite opportunity here for what can be run on the network. And so it's been amazing to see the creativity of individual startups trying to run models to do certain things for their app, all the way up to enterprise partners or customers that would use the network for decentralized computing for redundancy and reliability. So we're very excited to sort of keep the incentive net moving and continue to grow. The last stage is APIs, SDK, and apps. So in the long run, the Lilypad network wants to ensure we have a very robust SDK for developers to be able to do everything under the sun with Lilypad in terms of the functionality we offer. And then in addition to that, providing applications built on top of the network that leverage that SDK or some of our APIs. So we're excited about, as I mentioned, anything from startups launching models to provide for their end users, all the way to enterprise use cases that are much more would require much more amounts of privacy and added layers of security. So in addition to that, we do plan on launching a SaaS product for Lilypad. And so, we'll have our own platform where, users can log in, making it really easy to add models to the network, making it really easy to find compute capacity. And at the end of the day, just like, taking the experience we have currently with our CLI, our API, and even on the smart contracts that you can use to interact with the Lilypad network, making all of that even easier to use. And sort of broadening the audience for who that technology is built for, I guess, and who it's a development platform like that would be much more approachable for non-technical users. And so, in addition to catering to developers, we are really focused and interested in catering to the generic software world of people who need compute and are looking for alternatives that are safer, faster, and cheaper. So, I think I already sort of talked a little bit about this, but the Lilypad network launched its V1 testnet in July of last year. And since then, we've been iterating. Q1, we launched the calibration net, which is when we first started onboarding. Q1 of this year was when we first started onboarding GPU providers and really like stress testing the network. Stress testing the assumptions, stress testing the game theory, making sure that all of our documentation is in order. We really appreciate all the feedback from the community on, hey, this doesn't make any sense, or hey, like I'm not a Docker expert. Can you please add more information about Docker? Or one thing we've noticed is that our team is pretty Web3 inclined, and so we've definitely upgraded our documentation in terms of how to interact with MetaMask. How do you add a network to a MetaMask wallet? How do you interact with a crypto faucet? Some of these things we sort of just assumed were known, and we were really happy to hear from the community that hey, we need more information about this, because we don't want to just cater to Web3 experts. We want to make Lilypad very easy to use for developers and individuals and AI researchers. We don't want you to have to be a Web3 expert to use the network, and so that's sort of how we think about when we prioritize our development. Yep. And as mentioned, we launched our, incentivized testnet, phase 0 in Q2. We are now in phase 1 and really focused on, onboarding supply. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be moving into stage 2, phase 2, which is focused a lot more on, the demand side and the developer tool side. The intention and the aim right now is to launch our Lilypad mainnet in Q4 of this year. And so, when that happens, we'll definitely be deployed to Arbitrum. The sort of just there's discussions internally about, what other change would we potentially deploy to for mainnet. But of course, once the Lilypad ERC20 token launches, then, the whole ecosystem and the whole economy will be sort of kickstarted on mainnet. And of course, anyone earning points during the incentive net phase will be rewarded with Lilypad tokens. So, super excited for this roadmap. We really appreciate the patience and really the input from the community. It's been incredible to see, all of the feedback we get and all of the interest we're getting from not only GPU providers, but AI researchers, enterprises, developers. We're just so thrilled, and we just can't thank you all enough. So get involved. That's the number one call to action here. Get involved. Jump into our Discord. Ask questions. Feel free to contribute. We are working on a open source contribution guide, and so we are going to standardize a little bit how PRs and how code can be contributed to the Lilypad stack, and some of the other tooling that we have that people might be interested in contributing to. Of course, our website, lilypad.tech, has a lot of information about sort of the vision and the roadmap. We've got our blog there. We write a lot about, we have a project report where we sort of are giving the community an update every 2 weeks on what's happening in the network across engineering, across research, across our tokenomics. We also write about how we see the world, how we see AI, how we see the need for decentralized compute over time. And so, feel free. Please follow us on blog.lilypadnetwork.org. We really care deeply about sharing what we're thinking, and then also sharing what we're learning from the community. And then, of course, check out our YouTube. We have some awesome videos. We have tutorials from some of our developers on how to set up a node, deactivating a node, running different models using the Lilypad CLI. We have a lot of content there aimed at making the developer experience awesome. And so please check that out. And So I think I'll stop here real quick and open the floor to see if there's any questions. And if not, then I think Arson, I think we can sort of jump in a little bit to kind of what we're seeing with the incentive net and some of the learnings that we have, and maybe if you could sort of talk a little bit about sort of our experience and sort of the decisions we made around Arbitrum, and why we sort of chose to deploy to that, I think that would be super awesome.
Alex, could you hold the fort for maybe 5 minutes or so? I need to rearrange something around on my schedule to
Yeah,
reshuffle your appointment, but just maybe get that going, line a few things up, and I'll be right back.
yeah, no stress at all. No stress at all. So yeah, so I mean, I can talk a little bit about this too while we wait for Arson. Um, so we needed a performant layer two on Ethereum to launch our incentive net and to really like maintain a foundation for our mainnet too. And so, having talked to pretty much all the layer twos in the Ethereum world, we did want to focus on EVM. We did believe that that's sort of the most ubiquitous and really like the best place to start for our network. And so, yeah, we launched, well, we sort of did a whole deep dive on, all right, what are the best EVM layer twos, and what are sort of the different mechanism or the different like values that they bring to the table in terms of like time to finality, transaction throughput, decentralization, all this kind of stuff. And so we settled on Arbitrum as the first layer two that we've deployed to. Of course, we're super interested in deploying to many others. But anyway, we started out with Arbitrum with just incredibly low time to finality, very high transaction throughput, and low cost. We obviously are in testnet right now, and so everything is in testnet tokens. But we are conscious of the fact that once the mainnet launches, we need the transactions to be very low cost. And so anyway, that was really like a big part of the decision around using Arbitrum was, okay, once we launch the mainnet and we're using mainnet tokens, like, are the costs making sense for the economy that we're creating here? Of course, we want the transaction fees to be negligible, to be extremely low, while while using the network. Otherwise, it ends up being a huge bottleneck, right? If transactions are costing huge amounts of crypto per time, like that model doesn't really make sense. And so we actually are learning a lot as we go in terms of what's the right costing model to implement here. And of course, with a low cost blockchain, that makes that question even easier. And so, yeah, we're like super excited to be launched on Arbitrum, and are interested and open to growing to a multi-chain future for Lilypad. So anyway, very exciting stuff. And yeah, we really appreciate all the feedback from the community. We launched a Galaxy campaign to sort of incentivize certain, well, really like to start out with like a one-on-one, like learn about Lilypad and sort of get the community engaged. And we've been blown away by the sort of participation there. And so yeah, between our Discord, Galaxy, and our socials, we like deeply appreciate the participation from the community. We were at ECC in Brussels, and it was so awesome to run into people running Lilypad nodes. My first question was, well, how's your experience been? What can we do better? What went wrong? And luckily, I had some great feedback, not too many complaints. Of course, there's questions about the points mechanism, and when are we going to be able to see the numbers that we're earning? And so obviously, we're working very hard on that, and that's coming very soon. And so anyway, it's yeah, it's been great to interact with the community. I will open it up for any other questions. I'm just looking through the chat here. I think we answered most of the questions that we are seeing here. But anyway, yeah, really appreciate everyone's participation. And please scan this QR code here to join the community and really help out, whether it's run a node, add a module, or even just ask questions. We are better together. And so that's something that we're really huge proponents of. And, as I mentioned before, Right now, we are not providing points for stuff like building, applications or contributing modules. But once we get to the next stage of our incentive net, then that plan has changed, and we will be, incentivizing um, developers and that kind of activity on the network. And so, don't stop, keep it up, keep building, and yeah, we're super happy to have you here. So Arson, I already sort of walked through sort of why we chose Arbitrum and kind of like the decisions around that. So maybe we can, jump to something different here. There was a lot going on in Brussels at HCC, right? We were at the Filecoin events, we were at the Zama fully homomorphic encryption events, we were at IPFS Camp, we were at tons of different events, and I would love to know your perspective on, some of the themes that you saw that really stood out to you, and some of the learnings that you think we should apply to Lilypad.
Yeah, I think what the most impactful technology was, as I mentioned earlier, it's the whole P2P communication and taking processes as they're happening across the network. Again, thousands of devices at the same time, and being able to establish channels that are P2P channels. So having, for instance, some sort of an orchestrator that is running your job, and at the same time, in addition to the complete jobs that Lilypad does now and posts the result pointer to blockchain, to be able to get that live status app update as it's happening. So I'm really excited about the P2P technology.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And it feels like too that I mean, there's a lot of value here in providing verifiability and redundancy, but it also feels like in the long run, we're competing and really outperforming on performance, right? So cost and in the enterprise world, they talk about like edge computing, right? They talk about like moving data and compute to the edge. And it definitely feels like using libp2p, IPFS, using Bacalao, all the things that we are using under the hood at Lilypad. Or I don't believe we're using libp2p, but we do use IPFS. It definitely feels like the long term opportunity for these technologies is to push data and compute as far out to the edge as possible, without getting into the corporate buzzword stuff like at the end of the day, it's like safer, faster, cheaper, right? Like we're providing better performance and using modern technology to do that.
And just to add to that too, there were many P2 or GPU infrastructure providers out there. I think some of the limitations that I've seen in those is that you have to create this reservation for, let's say, a month, and so you're kind of creating a bigger commitment, and you're paying for the whole month as opposed to paying incrementally for just what you need. And one of the ways that our platform can leverage that as an aggregator is to create partnerships with such companies that want to provide a GPU for a month, and us being kind of the middle tier in that context, we can line up those jobs so that that infrastructure is fully utilized, and there's no downtime for, or not downtown, but unutilized time for other GPU providers, big, data centers that have this infrastructure in place. We could be a channel to have that be accessible to the end users at large capacity
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No, I
scale.
mean, yeah, that's very exciting. Like it definitely feels like there's a lot of decentralized compute networks that sort of are trying to sort of take, grow market share and sort of understand where they fit here. And so, to your point, like we hear, okay, so what's the difference between Lilypad and some of these other networks, right? And I think to your point, like you basically you just pay for it and you just, utilize what you need. You don't need to reserve a GPU for a whole month. And so, yeah, so I guess, yeah, you see a lot of benefits in that just from a developer perspective, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think it's kind of passing on those incremental pay as you go optimizations through our platform, and it's a win-win all around. And we have people that have their 3080s, their 4090s that are they're gamers that make their GPUs available when they're not playing a game. And then there's also data centers and infrastructures with much larger cards as well that become available on our network through our protocol.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And so I guess that's where we end up, like, as you were saying, sort of being a partner almost to a lot of these other GPU networks that have sort of a different model. Is we sort of can end up being sort of the channel for demand to show up to to those networks, and then utilize. So I guess in that scenario, would you see that these GPUs that you sort of have to rent out on a monthly basis? Do you think that we would sort of just set that up on the back end as sort of a deal where we just say, hey, like these are now Lilypad nodes that we're going to be running, and
I
we'll
mean,
send you demand? Or how do you think that plays
yeah, I
out?
mean, we don't have to do that. I mean, we can do that. We'll definitely be there for our partners to help them get that set up. It's pretty straightforward. We expect to have kind of these quick start deployments where they fire up they fire up their cluster, or they fire up the servers on their network. And I'm anticipating that we'll provide them with an image to be able to do that, and it'll just come online and be part of the Lilypad network, part of the pool. And this actually works both ways as well. There's going to be other sort of GPU providers that may find that Lilypad is a much better value than, let's say, Amazon, and they'll create their own services for image processing or audio processing, or movie generation, audio generation. And they'll build that infrastructure, that almost like an API set that's specific for other companies to build on top of, and they'll pipe these jobs to us. And it's almost like it's another middle tier that somebody else will utilize as well, and save a lot of money by not having to pay a premium for GPUs, which are there aren't enough of them on the market, and there's huge demand for it. So
For
yeah, we
sure.
create
And
that scalability, not just for the end user who is, let's say, building an app that needs some sort of GPU processor, but another aggregator that will use us as well. So it kind of flows both ways. And it's a trending market. There's plenty of demand, and there's plenty of um, uh, ways for us to collaborate with each other, across the ecosystem.
for sure. Yeah, totally, totally. Well, and also like these GPUs are not cheap, right? So even if you do get access to them, it's not cheap to have a GPU spun up for a whole month, even when maybe you're not even using it, right? So I think you mentioned cost, right? Like that's something that we're probably, is more of a longer run. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's a shorter run benefit already. But it definitely feels like the approach that we've taken in terms of like pay as you go, pay for what you use. It'll be very exciting to see. We're going to have to do a lot of benchmarking. Like I'll work on that. Like just how much would it cost to run this app, with this service versus running it with Lilypad with the architecture that we have. It's guaranteed that the costs will be much lower. Of course, that varies based on usage. It varies based on a lot of things. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah,
that's
and these platforms are configured in different ways. Um, let's say let's say there are other resource providers or other companies, other organizations that maybe let you pay for a GPU on an hourly basis. There's still this kind of bloat that goes along with booting up the operating system, and initializing everything. And it's there's quite a bit of DevOps and engineering that needs to go into getting that set up just right when you're building around a platform like that. We have a really straightforward interface with our CLI tooling. So at a most basic level, let's say if somebody's building something in JavaScript, where they have a front end and they have a back end, they can uh, initiate a process directly within the browser by using MetaMask. That's like a Web3 approach of doing it. But you could also build almost like a traditional Web2 app, or a mobile app, and have the resources be accessed on the back end. So you would have your server that's taking in the job, and then passing it and then submitting that job through on the blockchain. So the gist of it is that they would either call a CLI process, so like an executable on their server that would run the job, or do it programmatically through interacting directly with the blockchain by submitting a job to the blockchain and then getting a response on the blockchain, being notified, and then pushing that result back to the front end. So there are many ways to configure this system, and of course um, it's a kind of a case by case basis as far as what the users actually need. But we're open to having those conversations. We're here to support you guys. We're here to support the community, and whatever project you're working on, we'd be glad to show you how to plug into what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely feels like part of the value is that you said sort of at the beginning, we're abstracting away some of the complexity, like you were saying, some of the DevOps complexity, some of the configurations of the servers. Like when we talk to developers, it definitely resonates that, like, hey, like, you basically outsource your backend to Lilypad, and we abstract away a lot of the complexity. Even today with just the CLI, as you mentioned, and then in the future with our SaaS product, that really differentiates us, but also provides just such an awesome experience, even for like, if you're not like an expert developer, right? Even if you're just a startup you just need, to run a model in your app, and you're not trying to become, an AI expert or a Web3 expert. That definitely feels like, the way that we've approached this makes it really easy for that. Going along those lines, I also wanted to ask your opinion, Arsen. It feels like we're starting to get questions more and more about privacy. There's a lot of use cases that, whether they be enterprise or whether they be medical, that sort of require, additional layers of privacy. What do you think, based on what you're seeing? What do you think? Or first of all, do you agree? Are you also seeing this? And then, what do you think would be some of like the impactful ways to sort of address that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many ways to do privacy and kind of layers of privacy. So if you, let's say, take your iPhone, right? That is a private device, right? But if it ends up, let's say, in the hands of someone who is a professional data extractor, they'll be able to extract the data from your private iPhone. So there's a spectrum of levels of privacy. So at the very base level, that is something that can be implemented through through a various kinds of mechanisms. So there's of end-to-end homomorphic encryption, which is kind of like the holy grail of privacy, where a machine will not know what it is that it's actually computing. It's set up in a specific way where data comes in encrypted. It never gets decrypted. It gets processed on the machine itself without ever decrypting it. The result comes back also in an encrypted way, and then the client who has submitted that request is capable of then decrypting it and seeing what it is. That approach is 100 to 1,000 times slower than if you were to take it step down and still get pretty good privacy by exchanging private keys. So on the machine itself, it'll decrypt it during the processing time. Then it'll get the result back and then send the result back in an encrypted way. And that's still a good solution for doing certain kinds of processes. Yeah, there's kind of a gamut of different ways of implementing that, and depending on how sensitive the data is, what the legal regulations are for moving data around at a governance level. Those are going to be the types of approaches that a user would take in order to secure the data and keep it private.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. It's like there's layers to privacy, and each use case kind of has a different need for a different layer.
Yeah, it's
Um,
definitely a spectrum.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And it doesn't make sense to sort of implement like the most hardcore privacy mechanisms as just default on Lilypad, right? Because as to your point, like there's so many different needs. A lot of products or a lot of services don't really need that much privacy. They don't want to be 100 to 1,000 times slower, right? So on the other hand, there's a lot of use cases that would like desperately need this type of something like fully homomorphic encryption, or even using something like Lit protocol to try to like encrypt and decrypt data with access controls. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So I think our team is sort of learning as we go and figuring out like what makes most sense at the core Lilypad architecture level, and then what makes sense to sort of add on top, different value add mechanisms.
Yeah,
That
and what we're just the level of privacy is it's totally open to at the module level. So it's we it's the end whoever needs a specific type of module, that privacy aspect is implemented at the module level. So this means that what we have is we're an infrastructure provider, and the technology will keep moving and getting better, and over time that flexibility is built into the system to adopt whatever privacy schema is applicable for the business use case.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's incredibly exciting. I mean, that unlocks so many different, use cases and avenues. You and I we're in conversations with partners in Brussels, and yeah, it's as we sort of wade into that and figure out those mechanisms and what makes sense to implement now versus later. I'm just so excited to see, the projects and the teams that start to use that stuff, because we know the need is there. We know that there's a lot of demand for it. It's just a matter of figuring out what's the right approach. So, and also like in terms of prioritization, what do we prioritize internally, based on that feedback. So anyway, but yeah, thanks, Arsen. Thanks so much for your time. I think we're going to wrap it up here. If anyone in the community has any other questions, please feel free to reach out, in our Discord. I will show it one more time. Yep, here's our Discord. Shout out to us on Twitter. Feel free to, even open up a PR on our GitHub. We are in the process, as I mentioned, of formalizing our contribution guide. So do keep an eye out for that. It'll make things much more smooth in terms of, if you want to contribute code to the network. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's watching and for all the future watchers out there. And yeah, please keep building and don't stop. Thanks so much, Arsen.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.